Friday, everyone. My name is Sam Miller, and I'm the Development Director of Buckeye Hills Regional Council. Thank you all so much for joining us today for the ARC Area Development Pre-Application. We are going to spend the next hour or so going through all things ARC pre-application with you in anticipation of us opening our applications. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. So this is just a little bit of an outline of the things we're going to cover today. We want to make sure that we go over who is Buckeye Hills. We're going to go over what is area development, the timeline for area development. We'll go over a couple of things with SM Apply, which is the platform we will be using to accept applications this year. We'll be going over the components of the applications, sharing some project examples, some funding information, how to use ARC's match calculator, and also some information on the scoring process. So first up, who is Buckeye Hills? So if you are on this call, it's very likely that you're familiar with us at Buckeye Hills, but I did just want to go over some pretty basic information about who we are and what we do. So we are a council of governments dedicated to improving the lives of residents in Southeastern Ohio. We cover 8 counties in Southeastern Ohio. I'm not going to read those all to you. If you are on this call, it's fairly likely that you represent one of those counties. We really try to facilitate community-based and regionally driven economic development. We are designated as the local development district by the Appalachian Regional Commission, ARC. We are the local partner in ARC's federal, state, local partnership, providing our member counties and municipalities with administrative, professional, and technical assistance. And in that partnership with the federal, state, local that ARC uses, our state partner is the Governor's Office of Appalachia. The Governor's Office of Appalachia advocates for Ohio's 32 Appalachian counties, including the 8 covered by Buckeye Hills, by supporting initiatives that promote economic prosperity for our region. They are a vital partner. They play a key role in all of this. And so we wanted to make sure that we acknowledge them on this call before we dug into it. This call is all about the ARC Area Development Pre-application. So area development is one of several funding opportunities through ARC. It really follows a bottom-up approach to empower communities to work with state governments for impactful projects. The proposals originate at the state level in consultation with the ARC State Program Manager in Ohio, that is the Governor's Office of Appalachia. In Ohio, we're a little bit different than how other states do it across the 13-state Appalachian region. Our state partner, Governor's Office of Appalachia, really relies on the 4 LDDs to run a pre-application process to find out what are those really competitive, compelling local projects. They rely on the LDDs to rate them, score them, and make a recommendation to the state on what projects should be funded with ARC area development. In area development, there are 3 main buckets of money. This isn't necessarily something that you need to be worrying about. This is something that we do on the back end at Buckeye Hills, is figuring out which bucket of money fits the best with your project description. But there is federal area development. This comes from the federal Appalachian Regional Commission. This is considered federal dollars. There is also distressed area development. This is money designated specifically for the distressed counties that have that economic status through the Appalachian Regional Commission. It's a very specific pot of money for those communities that fall in distressed counties. And again, Ohio is very unique as we have state area development dollars as well. Our state legislature kicks in an amount of money that matches what our federal partners put in for projects. So we have essentially twice the amount of money to do projects in the state of Ohio, which again is very rare when compared to what other communities are doing around the country.
Okay, this is the ARC area development timeline. So you'll see our pre-application opens March 24th, which is in 2 weeks, less than. Our pre-application then closes April 25th. So you have about a month to get all your ducks in a row. During the month of May, our staff will review and begin scoring each pre-application. In June and July, we'll present the projects to the county commissioners of each of our 8 counties. And then our executive committee will approve the final project list on August 1st. After they approve that list, we will open the full applications in Salesforce, which is the platform that the Governor's Office of Appalachia and ARC use. The selected projects will complete those applications. The Governor's Office of Appalachia and ARC will review them. After their approval, the project contact for each project will receive a grant agreement. Award funds will be available for expenditure after the grant agreement is signed and returned. It's important to note you can expect funds no earlier than January 2026. These are eligible applicants. You guys are all probably from one of these. So political subdivisions, your county, city, village, educational institutions, public institutions like port authorities and libraries, and nonprofits.
So last year was the first year that we used SM Apply to solicit the applications from our region. We got a lot of great feedback on using that platform, so we will be using it again. So again, we will be using SM Apply to collect applications this year. You can create an account as an individual or for an organization through the platform. I think many of you on the call put in applications last year. You can use that same login information to complete your application this year. Our hope is that this is a very simple process for you all, but I think sometimes technology is not always user friendly. So if you run into any issues creating an account on SM Apply to apply for this funding, please reach out to me and I'm happy to walk you through any pitfalls you might have. Again, it is very simple. The only thing that SM Apply needs to create your account is a first name, last name, email, password, and there's a CAPTCHA you have to also complete. But again, our hope is that it's very simple and we are here to help you at all with setting up your actual account. All right, so now we're going to move into the application and the information we need from you all to complete the whole process. So an overview of the application is really there are 4 types of information that's going to be collected through this application from you all. The first is respondent information. Very simply, who is the person that is filling out this application? Second is applicant information. Who is this application for? Those first 2 are not always the same, so we did try to make a distinction between them. The third is project information. What are you going to do? And the last is funding information. How much do you need to accomplish your project information? So again, these are 4 parts that we'll break down a little bit further. So the very first thing that it's going to ask you is your respondent information. This is going to ask for your name, phone number, and email. However, there are 2 very important questions at the end of this that I want to make sure we draw attention to. The first is, are you the applicant? In some cases, this might be yes, you are the applicant, and it will continue moving you through the process. However, if you are a consultant, a contractor, someone filling this out as for an entity, that answer is actually going to be no. The system will then prompt you to say, does the applicant know that you are submitting on their behalf? Please make sure that the communities that you are applying for know that you are submitting the pre-application. In the past, we've run into a community putting in a pre-application and a consultant putting in an application for the community. It makes it really difficult for us to know which one has the most up-to-date information. So if you are representing an engineering firm or a consultant on this call, please make sure that you're reaching out to your communities to say, I will be completing this pre-application for you. I will note that you do not need to have a consultant or a contractor to complete the pre-application. Our hope is that it's pretty user-friendly. But for those of you that are on the call that are working with communities, please make sure they know that you are submitting this before you submit it. Is this you, Emma, or is this me? Oh, you're muted, Emma.
I'm muted. Okay. So this is where you put the applicant information. So this tells us who the project is for. Need a point of contact name, phone number, email, and physical address. This part's really important too. You have to include an Oaks ID number, an EIN, a UEI, and the UEI expiration date. Most of you probably already have this information, but if you're unsure of what your numbers are, or if you don't have any, we have provided links in the pre-application where you can click and go figure that out. So next you'll provide the name and the contact information of the person or organization administering your project. If you're using an external project administrator, don't forget to include the administrative costs in your budget. Also, it's important to note Buckeye Hills is not able to administer ARC projects at this time. Here's where you enter in your project information. This is essential. Your project name should tell us exactly what the project is and where it will take place. So we've listed an example, sewer line extension, Wood County. We know exactly what it is, a sewer line extension, and where it's taking place, Wood County. Next, I'll ask you if your project is a construction project or a non-construction project. And then most importantly, you'll provide a project description. It should summarize your project. Give us the who, what, when, where, and how for each major activity that will occur during your project. You should paint a picture to let us know what will happen. Now you'll provide your strategic rationale. So before you did the who, what, when, where, and how, this is your project's why. What challenges does your project address? Does it support a regional strategy? Tell us how. Include your project timeline with the anticipated start and end dates. Let us know how your project will be financially sustained beyond the grant period of up to 3 years. Note, all the activities must be completed within 3 years of the grant agreement's execution. And remember, you should anticipate work to start no earlier than January 2026. All right, which counties will your project serve? You must upload county served documentation for each county you say your project will serve. You must provide a letter of support or email from community partners. Community partners can be county commissioners, township trustees, nonprofit leaders, and school district administration. Please know that the number of counties you serve does affect your match rate. So you'll just click which counties, and then there's a spot to upload. We just need one for each county. Next are the ARC investment priorities. The mission of ARC is to be a strategic partner in economic development in Appalachia. These investment priorities guide ARC's program investments, so your project must advance one of the following. The first one is building Appalachian businesses by boosting the economy through business development. 2 is building Appalachia's workforce ecosystem by helping people in your community gain and advance in jobs. Number 3 is building Appalachia's infrastructure by providing residents with reliable, affordable, and efficient utilities and infrastructure. 4 is building regional culture and tourism by preserving the region's culture and natural assets. 5 is building community leaders and capacity by supporting local leaders and organizations through technical assistance and resource access. Your project can also advance one state strategy. They kind of align with ARC's, so supporting Ohio's economy, improving access to health and education, developing the region's infrastructure, capitalizing on natural assets, and supporting capacity through technical assistance. So we're going to go through examples of each investment priority. First is the building Appalachian businesses, which is the Morgan County Improvement Corporation used their award funds for their project to purchase equipment, and then they leased it to Atlantic Emergency Solutions to expand their business. Next is building Appalachia's workforce ecosystem. BB2C, Building Bridges to Careers, used their funds to conduct a STEAM summer camp. They provided science, technology, engineering, art, and math activities to teach students through hands-on experience. Third is building Appalachia's infrastructure. The Village of Lowell used funding for their project to construct a new water treatment plant. Next is building regional culture and tourism. Ohio Appalachian Country used their funding to provide data on the economic impact of tourism on Appalachian, Ohio. And there's a little map they made with their funding. And finally, building community leaders and capacity. Buckeye Hills actually used this in their project to foster economic development in distressed counties. So these are just examples. They can be different, but now you know what you need for investment priorities. Every ARC implementation project should have at least one output measure and one outcome measure from ARC's catalog of measures, which you can find on their website. You must have one set of paired measures, and you may have one standalone measure or several standalone measures. Paired measures demonstrate improvements experienced by individuals or entities served by an ARC-funded project. So these are expressed as served and improved. They have to match. For example, if you select students served as an output, your outcome must be students improved. Other measures called standalone measures can be reported individually. For example, your output can be linear feet and your outcome can be cost reduced. And you can find a list of all of those on ARC's website.
All right, so going into the part of the application puzzle that is arguably the most important, before we dig into kind of all of the things that we're going to require for your funding information of the application, I want to state one important reminder. ARC wants to be the very last funding mechanism in your project's capital stack. So that means all other funds must be committed in a project before we can award ARC funding. So again, let's say you have a project and you need $50,000 more to get to that total cost. That is a perfect alignment for ARC to come in and be that last mile for you. If your project is just beginning and you have a very large multi-million-dollar project, ARC is not going to be the first funding mechanism that you want to build in that capital stack. So keep that in mind as we go through the next couple of slides, that again, ARC wants to be the last in. So for the funding information portion of the application, there are some things that are going to seem pretty intuitive through this whole process, and some things that I just want to we're going to hammer home because I want this to be as helpful as possible for you all during this process. The very first thing that this is going to ask is it's going to ask what your total project cost is. This is very likely going to be a large project. I know often we get infrastructure projects through this application process. So sometimes it's $1.5 million and you have a variety of funding mechanisms up to that. This is how much it's going to cost in total for your project to be complete. Then it's going to ask you for the amount requested for ARC. This is the very first year that we are going to put limits on the maximum amount that you can ask for based on the type of project that you are pursuing. So if your project is construction, you're moving dirt, is the simplest way to look at it. The most you can apply for is up to $750,000. If your project is non-construction, you're not moving dirt, then the most that you can ask for is $500,000. If you're unsure where your project falls into, reach out to Emma and I, and we're happy to give you some guidance on what category your project falls into. The next thing is you're going to have to tell us the amount of match that is needed, and we'll dig into this in a moment. But this is really an important part of this part up here, is that we want you to put your amounts of funding in with commas. I know this seems very strange, but I will be telling you the opposite of this further down in my presentation. But when you are putting in the total project costs, the amount requested, and the amount of match needed at the beginning of the funding information portion, please use commas. Great. Emma, next slide. So this year, for this upcoming fiscal year that will start October 1 of 2025, these are the county economic statuses as designated by ARC that also then dictate the amount of match that you are required to provide. The biggest change this year is Noble County will be going from distressed to at risk. Last year, Meigs and Noble were both distressed counties. This year, only Meigs is distressed. That means that they will have a match requirement of 20%. At-risk counties have a match rate of 30%, and we have 3 transitional counties in our region. Those have a match rate of 50-50. So as I mentioned, and this is linked in the application, we are encouraging applicants this year to use the ARC match calculator. When you click the link on our application, it will send you to the match calculator at ARC's website that you will then download. This is a great tool because it will tell you right off the bat how much match your project will need to have. So the very first thing that you will do is you will type in the name of your county. For this example, I used Jefferson County. Then I selected their economic status, which is at risk. And then from there, it will automatically auto-generate the cost share amount and the match amount for the project cost. So the more counties your project covers, the more of these you need to input, and it will create an average match rate for you later on in the spreadsheet. And on the next slide, we will get into a little bit more of what it generates for you. If you have multiple counties, if you see here in table 3, if this project would have 2 distressed counties, 1 at-risk county, 1 transitional, no competitive or attainment, it is telling me that based on the number of counties in this project, this off to the right here is the amount of match that I will need to have, which is 20%. This is a really great tool. I really want to encourage you all to use it because it tells you right off the bat what you can expect to just know you have to do 20%, 30%, 40%, etc. And it has more tools as well. So the way that you will all use this tool is you will put in table 5 the total expected ARC amount. In this case, this project would be asking for the most amount that it could, which is $750,000. We then input that we know that we have $100,000 that we can commit to as match. What this spreadsheet does is then generates your options in table 6. So in table 6, it says, I have 2 options to use $100,000 as match. I can change my ARC requested amount to $400,000, or I could increase my match amount to still stay at $750 with $187,500. I know that this table looks a little complicated. It is much more intuitive than this, but I do want to make sure that you all know the total project cost in table 5 is not your actual total project cost. You can't backwards math it. So if your project is $1.5 million and you want to put $1.5 million in the total project cost line, it's not going to backwards math it for you. You want to figure out what the match is dependent upon how much you're asking from ARC. So again, this is a very great tool. I encourage you all to download it and mess around with it a little bit before you use it to figure out what your match needs to be. If you run into any issues using the match calculator, let Emma and I know. We're happy to talk through with you how to use this useful tool. But we are encouraging everyone to do it this year. And we will go through later on in the presentation about why having the correct amount of match is so important. So once you have done all the stuff, you've said how much you need from ARC, and how much you need as match, the next question it's going to prompt you to do is the funding justification. In as much detail as possible, we need you all to tell us what you're going to do with the money you're requesting. And then said this is really important because when the project moves on to the Governor's Office of Appalachia and to ARC, they are not going to have as much information about the project as you might or we at Buckeye Hills might have. A bad example of a funding justification would be funding through ARC will be used to revitalize downtown Steubenville. We have no idea what revitalize downtown Steubenville means in this example. A better funding justification would be this project will advance efforts to revitalize downtown Steubenville through the renovations of the Grand Theater. $200,000 of the ARC request will go to repointing the building's brick facade. The remaining $550,000 will go to improvements to the building's HVAC upgrades. We know exactly how much of the funding amount is going to each specific activity. This is what ARC has told us point blank that they are looking for. They need to know exactly what you're going to do with the amount of money requested. So we are really trying to embed this earlier on in our pre-application to set you up for success in the long run. Once you tell us what you're going to do with this money, you are going to see a table generate at the bottom of the document that is your project cost breakdown. You will provide all information on the funding sources currently in a project in this table. One note you're really going to want to show is that you need to put the ARC funds you're requesting in this breakdown so it shows how ARC is finishing out the project. what I put in here, and this is what I told you, said we would get back to this later, is you do not include commas in the amounts that you're putting in amount. I know seems so silly, but these are auto summed. And if you put a comma into your amounts, it will create an error and it will not be able to submit your application. So when you put in your amount numbers, you only want to put in numbers, no commas, no letters. Additionally, this year, we've added more options to the type column of the funding breakdown. So you'll have an option to choose grant, loan, in kind, as well as local cash to show exactly all of the sources of funding that are going into your project. A huge important thing to remember, we ran into this a lot last year, is that in order for this to show as being complete, you will need to scroll over to the last column, which is this source being used as match. All of your funding sources have to have something checked to it if it's being used for match or not. The way that it will generate on your screen, that last column is hidden. It doesn't fit within the window, so you have to scroll over. So if you are trying to submit your application and you're hitting submit and it's saying that there's an error and you have no idea why, it is probably because you did not select which of your sources are being used as match on that last column. And then from there, it will, like I said, auto generate the amount of your funding breakdown. So what this does in the system is it will pull the amount that you stated at the top of your application as being your total project cost. And then it has the amount that the table summed up for you on the left-hand side. It is crucial that these two amounts of money match. If they don't, it either states that you have more funding than your project actually needs, which does not make it competitive for ARC, or it's showing that your project does not have enough money to complete your capital stack and therefore makes it not competitive for ARC. So these two will automatically be generated for you. These are not something that you input in this part of the application. They pull from previous information that you input. But really make sure these two match, because this is what we're going to look for to see whether or not your project can move forward for funding. So you've put in all the numbers and the dollars and cents. You've told us what's going to be used for match. You told us how you're going to use the funding. And the last thing that we need from you in this portion is documentation saying that you actually have the money that you said you have. For every funding source that is showed as confirmed, you must supply documentation that shows they are committed. This could be a grant agreement, an award letter, anything that says from the awarding body that you have this money or you will have this money before work begins. For sources being used as match, you must supply a letter from the project fiscal administrator on official letterhead that states they know the funds are being used as match. This is really important. We want it to be as an official as possible letter so that we know that those folks are aware that you're using those funds for match, but also that lets us know that you really do have that money. What kills a lot of the projects that come through this process is we get them ready to go forth to do their ARC application, and suddenly they actually don't have all of the match that they said they had beforehand. There is not a lot that I can do to help your project after we've selected it to move forward to find additional funds to fill out that capital stack for your project. So please make sure you are actually putting accurate information in, and for lack of a better phrase, showing your work that you do have all of the things you say you do. A lot of the projects that come through this do use Ohio Water Development Authority funding as match. If that is the case for your project, we need a letter of intent from your chief financial officer saying that you are intending to apply for this program. Additionally, if your community is on the principal forgiveness list, we will need that spreadsheet that shows that you have received principal forgiveness. All right, so we have gone through all of the components of the application. You've given us everything that we needed to make your project compelling. Once you input everything, for the next couple of months, Emma, Michelle, and I sit down and we begin scoring your application. And I'm going to go through how your project is scored so that everyone is in the know on the process. So your project goes through 3 steps of review. before you hear from us on whether or not it's been funded. That is an eligibility review, a project information review, and an internal review. Through this review process, the highest score that your project could receive is a 175. However, it is very unlikely that your project will score that high. So just be aware that it's very likely that your project could score maybe a 100 and still be a competitive project. So I'm going to go through where the funding breakdown exists so that you have as much information as possible. The very first review your project goes through is an eligibility review. There are no points associated with this section. It is more of a pass-fail methodology. In order for your project to move forward to start receiving a formal score, you must answer yes to all of these questions. So your project must have all of its funds committed. It must be an eligible applicant under ARC's guidance. You must have a UEI, EIN in Oaks, and you must have the appropriate and correct county served documentation. If your project, for any reason, answers no to one of these questions, it is immediately not scored and moved to our backup list of ARC projects that we might fund if we receive more money. So it's really important that you make sure that you have all of this information on here, because this is the very first step of the scoring process. If your project is missing any of this information, it immediately gets taken out of the review process and placed onto backup. So the next part of the scoring process is the project information review. So how did we come up with the scoring criteria? I really want to provide some guidance. It's not just Emma and I sitting in our offices thinking about what's the best for the region. We really rely on the members of our executive committee to rank and review the investment priorities of ARC. Their ranking of those investment priorities does inform our scoring rubric. Points are allocated objectively based on the application information you all input. So you are awarded points based on the counties served, which can be multiple. You're awarded points on the regional goal area that you advance. You can advance only one. You are evaluated on the paired measure outcome. Again, you can only advance one. You are provided points on yes or no, whether you have a clear financial sustainability plan beyond the grant period. And you also have points based on a yes or no, based on the urgency of your project through necessary documentation. So I'm gonna, on the next slide, it has a very clear breakdown of what it actually looks like. So as you can see, you are given points based on the counties that your project covers and the amount based on the area, the investment priority area that you advance. The paired performance measures are matched with the alignment area per ARC's guidance. So if you are, the most points that you get is from communities improved and households improved. This is in alignment with the highest scoring investment priority, which is infrastructure. Additionally, you get 5 points if you have a clear financial sustainability plan, and 5 points if you have a sense of urgency through necessary documentation. This will tell you in the application, it prompts you to upload this information. If you do have orders or findings from EPA, then that tells you your project has a very high level of need and urgency, and you do receive additional points for that. So the next thing is your project's gone through eligibility. It's looking great. Your project has gone through project information review. It's looking good. The last step that it goes through is an internal review. And this part of the review is entirely subjective based on the person who is reviewing your application. You are scored on the following parts of your application: the strength of your narrative, the strength of your rationale, and the strength of your regional collaboration. You are scored on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being proficient, 5 being emerging, 1 being minimum. The highest score you can earn through this process is 30 points. But again, it is totally reliant upon how the reviewer interprets the strength of your narrative and all of the written portions of your application. A really easy way to look at this is the project information portion of the review is really that multiple choice questions on a quiz. The internal review is more of the written response portion of a quiz. It really is up to the teacher to interpret how well they believed you answered the question. It's done the same way here.
Okay, now we're going to go into some frequently asked questions. So last year was the first year we revamped our pre-application process, which came with a lot of questions. So here are the ones we heard the most. Number one, when will I get my money? So grant awards will be available for expenditure after you sign and return your grant agreement no earlier than January 2026. So plan for that. I would say probably later than that, but that's the earliest possible. Expenses for the project incurred before the grant agreement start date are not allowable. So if you do any work before you signed and returned your grant agreement, you can't use ARC money to pay for that. Who scores my pre-application? Sam, who's our development director, Michelle Heyer, which I'm sure you all know, our program manager, and me, Emma, a development specialist. Which brings to the next question, who can help me with our pre-application? Since Sam, Michelle, and I score them, we are not able to help you in writing parts of your pre-application. That would be unfair. So we've enlisted our other development specialist, Kylie Nichols. Here's her email, knichols@buckeyehills.org, and she can help you just as much as we can. And if she's stuck, we'll all figure it out. But Kylie is your go-to with the pre-application. When it comes to the full application, Sam, Michelle, and I, and Kylie, we can all help you do that. What can I use as match? You can use grants, federal, state, and local. You can use local cash, loans, in kind, which we're limiting to 10% because it gets a little hairy, and philanthropic funds.
As a reminder, Emma and I are happy to answer any questions you might have regarding SM Apply and creating your account. However, once the application opens on March 24th, we will not be able to answer any application questions. Instead, you'll need to reach out to Kylie Nichols. We provided her email earlier, and it will also be in the slides when we send them all to you. She is the one who can help answer any of the nitty-gritty questions on which investment priority your project advances, how to write a narrative in a compelling way. That will all be things that Kylie can help you with. That is the end of our presentation and the end of our time together. Again, thank you so much for spending the time with us. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us or email Kylie. And we are looking forward to another really great round of applications this year.